is supported by a large coalition of local governments, the plastics industry, environmental groups, and solid waste haulers. There is no known opposition, and I respectfully urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 61, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 53, AB 1156. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1156 by Assemblymember McGee and others, an act relating to pupils.
Mr. Eng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1156 is back for concurrence. Amendments add co-authors and make technical and clarifying amendments. There's no listed opposition, and the bill has bipartisan support.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 18. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 54 has been dispensed with. File item 55, AB 1210. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1210 by Assemblymember Garrick and others, an act relating to water quality and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I rise to speak to you about AB 1210. This is an urgency bill. This bill simply explains or exempts the licensing extra requirement that civil engineers have been placed on them. We believe this policy is sound, and we encourage members to know that we've worked very diligently with our stakeholders to achieve a consensus outcome. This bill has not received a single no vote in either House, and I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to also support AB 1210, which is supported by both public and private sector engineers and contractors. This consensus measure is being presented as a solution to a legitimate problem which threatens our ability to put people to work on approved infrastructure projects in California. The stakeholders have come together, resolved issues that were there. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 65, no 0 on the urgency. Aye 65, no 0 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 56, AB 1219. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1219 by Assemblymember Perea, an act relating to credit cards and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Concur. Mr. Perea.
Madam Speaker and members, AB 1219 would remedy the unintended consequences of the Pineda v. Williams-Sonoma case, which determined the collection of zip code data is personal identification information. Consumers currently enjoy the convenience of using credit cards at the pump. This urgency measure is intended to ensure those practices can't continue. This has passed, just recently passed the Senate on a 35-0 vote. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 63, no 0 on the urgency. Aye 63, no 0 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 57, AB 1296. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1296 by Assemblymember Bonilla, an act relating to public health.
Ms. Bonilla.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1296 enacts the Healthcare Reform Eligibility, Enrollment, and Retention Planning Act to implement the Federal Affordable Care Act No Wrong Door. It's a user-friendly, efficient application system that streamlines and simplifies eligibility, enrollment, and retention in the state health subsidy programs. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 10. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 58, AB 1297. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1297 by Assemblymember Chesbro, an act relating to mental health.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. AB 1297 will bring the state's requirements for specialty Medi-Cal mental health managed care into alignment with federal requirements in order to maximize federal reimbursement. This bill will also clarify that state standards are consistent with federal requirements in three main areas. This bill is back for concurrence, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 57, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 59. Passed temporarily. File item 60. File item 60, AB 1329. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1329 by Assemblymember Davis, an act related to disease reporting and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today I ask for your aye vote for concurrence on AB 1329, which would streamline this process by the Department of Public Health of the state so that they can operate California's statewide and regional cancer registry. The new amendment taken in the Senate will broaden the options and mechanisms that may be used to allocate funds to entities operating the statewide cancer registry. AB 1329 enjoys unanimous bipartisan support from both the Assembly and the Senate. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0 on the urgency. Ayes 61, no 0 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 61, AB 1330. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1330 by Assemblymember Furutani, an act relating to graduation requirements.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Excuse me. AB 1330 is back for concurrence. AB 1330 gives high school students the option of completing a career technical education course to fulfill an existing high school graduation requirement. The amendments taken in the Senate expands this option to regional occupational centers and programs, expands the reporting requirement, and adjusts the sunset date. AB 1330 has received bipartisan support. It received 78 votes in the Assembly and 37 votes in the Senate. This bill has a diverse list of support, such as Public Education Superintendent Tom Torlakson, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, teachers, administrators, laborers, and manufacturers. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 57, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 62, AB 1344. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1344 by Assemblymember Fier and others, an act relating to local government.
Mr. Fior.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is a government transparency bill that is the result of hard work after the scandal in Bell. This bill had a 78-0 vote on this floor. Senate amendments increase transparency in the bill and prevent the inadvertent rewarding of criminal behavior by public officials. I urge an aye vote on the concurrence.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 57, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 63, AB 1379. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1379 by Assemblymember Bradford and others, an act relating to economic development.
Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. AB 1379 allows public pension funds with assets over $4 billion to just annually report to the controller their investments in California and its emerging markets. Having state-tracked investments, fully diversified public pension funds in emerging markets is a way to highlight their growth potential for other private sector investors. It has support by CalPERS, CalSTRS. I respectfully ask for concurrence of Senate amendments.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, no 16. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 64 has been re-referred. File item 65, AB 1420. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1420 by Assembly Committee on Governmental Organizations, an act relating to the Emergency Management Assistance Compact.
Concur, concur. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Senate amendments extend the sunset date for the operation of the Emergency Management Assistance Compact to March 1st, 2015. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 61, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 66 has been re-referred. File item 67, AB 1425. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1425 by Assembly Committee on Insurance and Act relating to insurance.
Passed temporarily. File item 68, AB 922. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 922 by Assemblymember Monning and Act relating to health care coverage.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is back to us on concurrence with Senate amendments. AB 922 establishes Office of Patient Advocate to concentrate a one-stop resource for patients, consumers anticipating health care reform and eliminating duplication in the current state access to consumers. Another amendment that comes from the Senate is the moving of Department of Managed Health Care Services under the Agency of California Health and Human Services. This has been supported by the department, by the administration. I ask for your concurrence in the Senate amendments.
Mr. Silva.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to AB 922. Permission to ask the presenter a question?
Without objection.
Why is the legislature rushing to enact sweeping changes to a health care system that is based on a federal law that has been found unconstitutional by our federal courts?
Thank you, Mr. Silva. We've been working on this bill for almost 2 years. It's been fully vetted in our health committee, our assembly. This is to position California to facilitate the implementation of a law that is currently the law of the nation and which the prior administration and the current administration have supported. This law promises to expand eligibility and access to 4.5 to 5 million Californians. It offers to promise reductions to small business owners, families, and promote health in the state of California. This bill goes specifically to facilitating that implementation.
My own time. Members, this bill amounts to a massive expansion of government to pave the way for the implementation of Obamacare here in the state of California. I would request a no vote.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hopefully my voice is a little clearer than last time. I also have to rise in opposition. While in my view this measure is just a backdoor approach to requiring taxpayers and ratepayers to pay for a massive new state government health care program. Assembly Bill 922 would transfer and expand the duties of the Office of Patient Advocacy to the Health and Human Services Agency. It is highly likely that there will be many dollars available, that there will be any dollars available to California for the expansion of this government program from the federal government. Given the climate in Washington, D.C. and the tax revenue that we are not generating in this state or the federal government because of the unemployment rate and the overregulation, this will just cause a greater deficit, and I urge a no vote.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to AB 922. What it does is transfer and expand the duties of the Office of the Patient Advocate to the Health and Human Services Agency. That is likely to cost us as a state a significant amount of dollars. Now, I think the proponents argue, of course, we can go to the feds and seek those dollars back in reimbursement. That might be a legitimate argument if, in fact, the feds were flush. We know, of course, that they're perhaps in even worse shape than we are, the difference being they have a printing press, can print dollars, and we can't. So it is unrealistic for us to expect the feds to come ride to the rescue and ease the burden of this new mandate from our backs and take it upon themselves. That leaves it to the taxpayers of the state of California and the general fund to fund this quite expensive new program. And, of course, It does it within the shadow of what has been euphemistically called Obamacare. As was alluded to earlier in the debate, it is premature for us to take any steps towards implementing Obamacare. Admittedly, it is, quote, the law of the land right now, close quote, but I'm not sure there's a soul who would be willing to say it will, in fact, remain the law of the land too much longer. We've seen a number of federal courts say it has significant constitutional problems. We've seen federal courts say it's fine and dandy. Thank you, Madam Speaker. All that means is that it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court for resolution, and then we're going to have an election on the author of Obamacare, Mr. Obama himself. So we are way ahead of the game here trying to pass this legislation. The proverbial cart goes before the horse, and it's unnecessary. Let's not expose our taxpayers and our general fund to additional dollars. Let's take a more prudent wait-and-see attitude. I urge a no vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Dr. Pan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I want to speak in favor of this very important bill. Certainly part of the bill is in preparation for the Affordable Care Act, but I would argue that even in the absence of the Affordable Care Act, we still need this bill. Trying to get health insurance coverage and getting help and using it effectively is something that this Office of Patient Advocacy is going to be doing, and that's going to make more effective, efficient use of health care. Actually, the state itself, through many programs, provides health coverage for health care. And in fact, this office will help those families out. In addition, we do not need the families to be trying to navigate the complex bureaucracy of different departments. And what this does is it consolidates through this one office together so that there's one place for the families to go that can help assist them in being sure that they get the help they need. And that, I think, is a very important thing for both greater efficiency as well as reduced fragmentation and duplication, things that I know many of my colleagues have argued about, that we should try to find ways to actually make our government more efficient, less duplicative, and more effective. And that's what this would do as well. So in terms of the particular agencies, so certainly the Department of Health Services is the one that has many of the health care services. It's good to have them co-located in the same department. So again, I would urge an aye vote. I think this is, again, a bill that's needed and the bill that will help us move forward and help families in our state be sure they can get the health care coverage that they need and the health care they need ultimately. Thank you.
Dr. Halderman.
I can't seem to figure out if we're all reading the same bill. This bill doesn't have anything to do with insurance. It doesn't have anything to do with bringing more doctors or increasing access to care. What this bill does is suggest that somehow the regulatory agency that's currently in charge of Medi-Cal is doing such a good job that we ought to make it in charge of more stuff. I don't see the premise there. DMHC is a separate entity at this point, and there is no evidence that we can expect an improvement under agency. It is already dealing with the bureaucracy of Medi-Cal in an inefficient, expensive way that is not effectively delivering care. So I'm not sure what we're accomplishing except spending a lot of money that's pretty premature. I urge a no vote.
Ms. Bonilla.
Currently, there are 8 governmental agencies that are doing this work. Many consumers don't know where to turn or who to go to get the insurance help and the advocacy help that they need. If you believe in efficiency, you'll support this bill. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Monning, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the conversation on this. We've vetted this in committee. We've been very considerate in the amendments that have been taken on the Senate side to eliminate duplication. In fact, this is good governance. This is taking away 8 different hotlines and consolidating into a one-stop shop that will direct people to the appropriate insurance entity or provider to process eligibility and access or to process a complaint. I might also point out that the state of California becomes eligible for federal support for the implementation of this and is in fact required to implement this type of consumer ombudsman support The bill enjoys broad support. I urge your aye vote on concurrence.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 20. Senate amendments are concurred in. We're going to go back to file item 67, AB 1425. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1425 by Assembly Committee on Insurance, an act relating to insurance.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a committee insurance bill, non-controversial. Some amendments were made in the Senate to address some noticing requirements. I ask for your aye vote and the concurrence.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 66, noes 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay. For the concurrence file, are there any members that wish to take an item up on the concurrence file that we have not taken up yet? Otherwise, I'm going to move to the Senate third reading file. Okay, members, we're going to go to Senate. Well, we're going to go to Assembly third reading, file item 76, AJR 8 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 8 with amendments by Assemblymember Furutani.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you for allowing me to take up this bill in mock-up form. This week on September 6th, Tuesday, the United States Navy approved the application to house the USS Iowa in the Port of Los Angeles. AJR 8 has been changed to not support that effort, but to applaud the effort that the Navy's decision relative to awarding it to the Port of Los Angeles, because it'll create jobs, economic synergy, and give access to everybody in the region to a very important part of American history. I urge and I vote. Thank you.
Okay, members, just to clarify, this is on the bill in chief. We already did the technical amendments earlier. So this is on the bill. Ms. Lowenthal?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise to say how pleased I am that the City of Los Angeles, the Port of Los Angeles, was able to attract this piece of history. It's going to mean a lot to not only the city, but to all Californians. I want to thank Mr. Furutani for his hard work on this. Thank you.
Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I, too, rise to congratulate Assemblymember Furutani and the Port of Los Angeles for winning the USS Iowa, which is currently moored in my district in Suisun Bay. There was a little bit of a friendly competition going on between Northern California and Southern California. We were hopeful that the USS Iowa would be moved to Mare Island in Mr. Allen's district of Vallejo, but all's fair in love and war, and so we wish to commend the people who have worked so hard in Southern California and wish the USS Iowa a very safe and happy journey south. I urge your aye vote on AJR 8.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 77, passed temporarily. File item 78, ACR 84. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 84 by Assemblymember Butler relative to Red Ribbon Week.
Ms. Butler.
Madam Speaker and members, Red Ribbon Week is the oldest and largest drug prevention campaign in the country. ACR 84 designates that Red Ribbon Week this year be celebrated on October 22nd through the 30th. Red Ribbon Week serves as a reminder for individuals and communities to take a stand for the hopes and dreams of our children and families by making a commitment to live in a drug-free America. Through our unity, we can work to educate and prevent our children from falling into the illegal drug trade and thus lose a promising young life. I ask that the first vote be for co-authors.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Ms. Butler requests that the first roll be open for co-authors. Co-authors members, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 62, no 0 on the co-authors, and we can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. Fall item 79, AJR 17. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 17 by Assemblymember Solorio relative to law enforcement programs.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I know, having been the past chair of the Public Safety Committee, that nearly every year we've asked the federal government to fully fund the cost that California incurs for incarcerating undocumented criminals. And I did not want this year to finish without us requesting full reimbursement through what's called the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program, also known as SCAP. However, in researching this issue, I also found that there were numerous other public safety federal programs that we were not getting a good amount of funding for, and we need to be more aggressive in seeking for those federal funds. The U.S. Bureau of Justice Assistance administers various law enforcement initiatives that are carried out in partnership with local law enforcement officers. Currently, for example, California receives federal funding for some of these programs, such as the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program, the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, the Project Safe Neighborhood Program, and the SCAP. However, we don't receive full funding for the incarceration of undocumented criminals, and for these other grant programs, we're receiving about 18% less. Members, both Democrats and Republicans, I think it's very important for us to join together in asking the federal government to fully reimburse us for those, for the incarceration of undocumented criminals, as well as more funding for all those good other anti-crime programs, and we need to support our law enforcement officers. Members, I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of AJR 1. It's really exciting to see the bipartisanship on this issue. This is critical that we recognize, especially given the Supreme Court's decision, that there is a tremendous cost to ignoring illegal immigration, and we are paying for it in our prisons, where we pay $53,263 per inmate. That's money we could be spending giving tax credits to businesses. It's money we could be spending taking care of our schools, our public safety, all these other things. It is critically important. And yet I find myself troubled. I find myself wondering what it is that we're doing. It's exciting. It's great. I'm glad to see that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will not pass up the opportunity to collect federal funds. But what about getting at the root cause? Why don't we actually address the incentives that we have built in that cause people to come to this country illegally? But we're not doing that. We're passing measures like we did last week to give $42 million so that people will come here because we're going to pay for your college education. And I think that at this time, that is a big mistake. I think it is absolutely.
Mr. Cedillo?
Yes, not speaking to the bill. Thank you.
Pardon? I couldn't hear him.
I couldn't hear you. What's your point of order?
Speaker and colleague is not addressing the bill. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Donnelly, you can.
Okay,
press the
I will get
bill.
right back on track with the bill. Madam Speaker, permission to use a prop?
Denied.
Okay.
Nobody's been allowed to use a prop today.
Okay, well,
Both
at
sides
least
of
we're
the
being
aisle.
consistent. Okay, I will not lift up the prop, but it's this big. I held a press release and a press conference back in March, and it is a bill. It is a bill for exactly, and you can read it right in AJR 1, which is essentially what AJR 17 is, and it says, President Obama, please give us $885,000 for the cost of incarcerating people in the country illegally. And, of course, he gives us 11 cents on the dollar. And so I think it is important, if we're going to ask for the funds, let's not turn around and create incentives for more people to come here illegally, thence more people winding up incarcerated, thence driving up the costs of this whole problem. I encourage my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I invite them to truly become part of the solution. We talk about bipartisanship. I know that every one of you recognizes that there's a tremendous cost. We've codified it here in our prison system, and this is a cost brought on by illegal immigration. It is brought on because we tolerate this. What about the cost to our schools? What about the cost to our hospitals? It's estimated from $11 to $22 billion. I would encourage every member of the other side of the aisle to stand and join with me in addressing those issues by not creating more incentives in laws that will create more illegal immigration, that will wind up with more criminal aliens incarcerated at our expense. And the last thing I'll say, in light of the Supreme Court's decision demanding that we release 33,000 to 43,000 criminals, I would also ask that we take an amendment on this AJR, if it's possible, and submit it to President Obama and say, President Obama, would you take the criminal aliens into custody, get them off our books so that's that many fewer criminals we have to release? I urge and I vote, and I commend the author.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I do also rise to support AJR 1 and its merits. We do need to go with our fiscal times we have here in Sacramento, and if our budget's tight, we need to get our money back from the federal government. They are not performing their job, and we need to go after those funds. Request your aye vote.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I, too, rise to support AJR 1. I think that, we should do this every year until this discrepancy has been cleared up. We should urge Congress to help us out. We have a major problem, just like all the border states do. I urge and I vote.
Mr. Alejo.
Madam Speaker and members, I rise in support of this resolution. It's not the first time that this resolution has been debated on this floor. It's been done on previous occasions, previous sessions. But this version separates the politics from the policy issue that's before us. The Latino Caucus asks for your aye vote on this bill.
Mr. Nielsen. Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise for AJR 1. I think it's an excellent bill, and I want to commend Assemblyman Donnelly and the author also for the bill, and I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Mr. Morell.
Madam Speaker, may I ask the author a question?
Without objection.
Yeah, Mr. Solorio, can you help me work through for the record how you came up with this language, please?
Sure. I chaired the Public Safety Committee for 3 years. So since then, I've tracked the type of federal funding available for public safety. Clearly, one important area is the SCAP program. We have not been receiving full funding for that, but there are many other good public safety programs funded by the federal government. We need to be equally aggressive in getting full funding for those programs. And I mentioned some of the programs that we're receiving. We've also received about a 18% cut in those programs, and we need to be aggressive across the board in protecting residents throughout our state.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, this is a good bill. It's a good bipartisan bill. It's a bill that could have been carried by Assemblyman Donnelly, but his bill was held. This bill moves. The Republican can carry a bill that's bipartisan just as well as a Democrat. Now, this bill the idea has been around and pursued for literally decades in California to reach our fair share. And even our congressional delegation over the decades has not been able to deliver on our entreaties, our California delegation, to have full funding. The federal government is not much better at taking care of California and its debts to our state than the state of California is to local government. And that's historically been very disappointing. It does not mean, though, that we should not keep up the good fight. I would observe the federal government does not even want to incarcerate these foreign-born felons as they should under immigration law that I worked on in 1996, where I requested and achieved a provision that said if you are a formerly deported felon illegally re-entering the United States, you could receive up to a 15-year federal term, but thereafter federal U.S. attorneys chose not to prosecute these individuals. I would only then assume, having met with these U.S. attorneys and had some strong words with them about their failure to prosecute, they didn't want to. They did not want to be bothered. They did not want to have them occupying beds in federal prisons. But therefore, the whole intent of that provision in federal law was lost, as with it was justice. We would hope, if we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to express our sentiments as the state of California about the federal government meeting its obligation to pay for this incarceration, then we would all be better off. This is a good I vote.
Ms. Grove.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise in support of AJR 1 and thank the author, Mr. Donnelly, for carrying that, and Mr. Solorio for you combining that information or the language with Mr. Donnelly's bill to make this bill go forward. And I support the bill.
Dr. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to commend the author of AJR 1. I very much appreciate the willingness of the Latino Legislative Caucus to work with Mr. Donnelly. I think this bipartisan collaboration shows a great deal of comedy with this House. In fact, when I have difficult legislation that I'm not sure how I'm going to go on, what I think is, what if my favorite person on my side of the aisle were carrying the legislation? How would I judge it? And for that reason, I'm absolutely delighted that the members of this House were able to see past the issue of personality, even past politics, and just look at good policy. I appreciate Mr. Solario's role in this drama. Thank you.
Mr. Silva.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, would like to congratulate my colleague, Mr. Solorio, on AJ R17. Being in local government for the last 24 years, we had to pay bills that were not fair. The federal government continues to deny it. We can't even get a good hearing in court. Mr. Solorio, thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank my colleague, Mr. Donnelly, for AJR 1. You've tried. Your heart is in the right direction, and I think that now is the time that maybe we can all work together and try and make California a better state. Thank you both.
Mr. Nestande.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the resolution, and I must say, though, things are getting quite petty around here. To have to take somebody else's bill to reintroduce it is just getting petty. Been here 3 years. I haven't heard as many points of order in those 3 years that I've heard in the last day or two. We're growing very intolerant here. I thought we were for tolerance, particularly the other party. We have points of order. We can't use props. Is free speech really that bad? Just let people say their piece. Don't get too upset. Argue back if you don't like it. But I just hope we show a little less pettiness going forward in this House. Thank you.
Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to thank Assemblymember Solorio. While many of us have great bill ideas, it takes a great author to bring people together and to find compromise. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to ask this body to support this great AJR.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Okay, let's strike the roll. Mr. Solorio is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. Co-authors on the first roll, clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. This is for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Tally the votes. Ayes 60 on the co-authors. We need a roll call on this vote. Clerk will open the roll. This is on the measure. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 64, no 0. Measure passes. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, can we lift the call on the Fuentes measure? The wharf?
Okay, without objection. All right. So we will recess the regular session for the purpose of convening or going back into the first extraordinary session. We're back in the extraordinary session. AB 40 is on call. We're going to lift the call. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 10. Measure passes. Members, no applauding on the floor in between bills. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go back into the regular session. Mr. Calderon. Mr. Calderon.
Okay, Madam Speaker, pursuant to Assembly, well, that's yours. I request unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62.8, the file notice requirement to allow Labor and Employment Committee to meet and to hear AB 101 by Speaker Perez today upon call of the Chair, room 447.
Without objection, pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring AB 101 by Mr. Speaker to the Committee on Labor and Employment.
And likewise, I request unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62A, file notice requirement to allow the Revenue and Taxation Committee to meet and to hear AB 1307 Skinner today upon call of the Chair in room 126.
Without objection and pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring AB 1307 Skinner to the Committee on Taxation, Revenue and Taxation.
And finally, I request unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62A, file notice requirements to allow the Local Government Committee to meet and hear AB 706 by Ms. Torres today upon call of the Chair in room 127.
Without objection. Okay, members, we are going to take a recess for an hour until... Hold on. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring AB 706 Torres to the Committee on Local Government. Mr. Swanson, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Speaker, just for clarification, the Committee on Labor is to meet immediately at recess?
Yes. We are going to take a 1-hour recess to allow the committees on labor, local governments, and revenue and taxation to meet, and we will reconvene back here at 8:35. So the committees will be meeting: local government, labor and employment, and revenue and taxation during this 1-hour recess. Okay, labor and employment will meet in room 447. Revenue and taxation will meet in room 126. And local government will meet in 127.